Hi everybody, and welcome to English Digest. I'm Pat.
And I'm Tom, and today we are talking about our travel unit here in the middle of the winter. And today we're going someplace further north than Taiwan. We're actually going to Scotland.
Yeah, this is a place, in all honesty, you may not want to go at this time of the year. In Scotland, particularly in the north, it'll be pretty covered with snow. Beautiful to see, but maybe a little more difficult to travel around and actually enjoy everything that Scotland has to offer. Now, I lived in Scotland for a year when I was at university in the south, in Edinburgh, but I've travelled up a few times into the Highlands, and it's a beautiful country, and this article brought back a lot of memories for me.
Well, if there's snow there during the winter, are there lots of ski resorts there in Scotland?
There are a few places you can ski, yep.
Okay.
And some of the lakes will freeze over, so there's a bit of skating to be done and things like that. But I think people sensibly stay inside.
Okay, but if you like the outdoors, hey, maybe this is the place to go.
Oh, for sure.
Or perhaps you could wait until spring break or summertime to head to Scotland there. And so that's the subject of today's lesson, and we'll be talking about Scotland again in our next lesson too. So let's get to it, everybody. Let's find out some things about Scotland. Let's read through today's lesson now one time.
The fair country of Scotland occupies the northern third of the UK mainland. Though there is much that Scotland and its people have in common with the rest of Britain, it also has a rich culture of its own. Once an independent nation, frequently at war with its southern neighbour, Scotland became closer with England in 1603 when King James VI ascended the English throne, becoming King James VI of Scotland and the first of England and Ireland. Just over a century later, the two countries were officially joined. Many Scots still dream of a country of their own, however, and the call for independence has only grown louder in recent times. Visitors to Scotland are always struck by the beauty of its countryside. It is home to Ben Nevis, the UK's highest mountain, as well as Loch Lomond, the largest lake. There are over 790 islands, including the Shetlands and the Orkneys, where prehistoric ruins dating back over 5,000 years have been found. In fact, wherever you go in the Scottish countryside, you feel like you are visiting an older world, where things continue on as they always have, quite unaffected by modern changes. Nowhere is this truer than in the Highlands, the northern and western parts of Scotland. Sparsely populated and full of mountains, lakes and glens, this beautiful region is also the home of the famous Loch Ness. This deep lake is said to be inhabited by Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster, a mythical creature thought to be a dinosaur or some unknown species. Many people take boat trips on the loch to gaze at the beautiful scenery and, just maybe, catch a glimpse of Nessie herself.
All right, everybody, let's talk about Scotland, the land of hill and glen. Glen here is an interesting word because we don't often use it in everyday English, but I believe glen is a typically Scottish word and just refers to like a long, narrow valley.
That's right. It's sometimes they're long and deep valleys. They're usually quite narrow, and they often have a river running through them. And it is, as Tom says, it's a Scottish word for a deep valley in the Highlands. That's kind of what it means. So that's why we use glens, and when we think of glens, we often think of the Scottish countryside and these kind of narrow rivers winding through the valleys. So the article starts by saying the fair country of Scotland occupies the northern third of the UK mainland. Here we're using fair, not to mean like fair, unfair, but fair as in kind of beautiful, nice, pleasant, attractive. And it occupies or fills up the northern third of the UK mainland. by which we mean Scotland, England, and Wales. There's a bit more of the UK in Northern Ireland over the sea and a few more, but Scotland is the northern part, kind of occupying the whole third or about a third of the landmass of the UK mainland.
1/3 of the landmass, but probably not a very big ratio in terms of population.
No, not really. It's not very heavily populated at all. And even then, most of the people are in the southern cities, Edinburgh and Glasgow.
Okay, so if you want to get away from it all, maybe Scotland's the place to head to. But again, it's way up north there in the UK mainland. And though there is much that Scotland and its people have in common with the rest of Britain, it also has a rich culture of its own. So if you don't know much about the UK and you meet a Scottish person and then you meet an English person, you might think, oh, they're more or less the same. But if you dig a little more deeply into it, you will find that, oh, no, there is a big difference because Scotland has a rich culture of its own. And I bet Scottish people probably don't really appreciate being confused with an English person.
Absolutely not. No, they would feel a little bit insulted if you said, so you're English. And no, I'm Scottish. Very definitely Scottish. And we can find out a bit more of that history, which is why there's a little bit of rivalry at times. Scotland was once an independent nation. It was by itself, it was free, it had its own kings and rulers, and it was frequently at war with its southern neighbour, meaning England. There were many wars, which is why we say frequently, between Scotland and England all the way back from kind of Roman Britain times through the Middle Ages. If you've seen movies like Braveheart, that displays one of the battles or several of the battles. Rob Roy, another movie with Liam Neeson, that looks at more of the battles in the sort of 1700s. But there were many wars between Scotland and the rest of England. However, they became closer in 1603. And this is when King James was a distant cousin of Queen Elizabeth I. He ascended the English throne after she died. Now, to ascend in this case means to rise to a higher position, and we can use it specifically to talk about becoming the next king or queen after somebody else has gone. You could also say someone could ascend the position of CEO after the previous CEO retires or, passes away or something. So you could ascend the position that way as well.
You certainly can, and of course, ascend can also be used just to indicate a rise in elevation. The jet ascended to a higher elevation to avoid the storm, for example. So in this particular case, though, King James VI became the king of England, so he ascended the throne. Throne here is not the past participle of the verb to throw. It's a different spelling here. This just means it's the chair that a king or an emperor or a bishop or the pope, or for example, can sit in when they're in that position. I don't suppose they probably spend a lot of time sitting in that chair, but it's
not
more
an
symbolic.
Awful lot, yeah. We can also we're using the throne here in a slightly more metaphorical kind of way. We don't just mean he sits on the throne. We often use the word throne to mean the position of being king. Okay, so James VI of Scotland, he was the 6th King James of Scotland, also became the 1st King James of Ireland and England, which is why he's both James VI and James I.
Cool, it's got two titles there. And just over a century later, which would be in the 1700s, the two countries were officially joined. So they had better relations because of King James VI, and then they got along pretty well after that. And then later they thought, what the heck? Let's become one nation. We'll drink your ales, and you guys drink our Scottish whiskey and stuff like that. Scotch whiskey, I should say.
Indeed, yeah.
And so they got to be bosom buddies there.
Although there were still more wars. It wasn't quite as peaceful as all that. There were a few rebellions, but which is kind of why many Scots still dream of a country of their own. There are large numbers of people in Scotland who do not wish to be part of the UK. You may remember an independence referendum a few years ago where there was a vote, and it went about 56 to 44 in terms of staying with the UK. However, with the Brexit thing happening thinking the Scots are once again looking at whether they can leave the UK and therefore rejoin the EU, which is why we say the call for independence has only grown louder in recent times. They may not want to be part of the UK for much longer.
Yes, the call for independence. That means lots of people would like to see Scotland be independent from the UK, the United Kingdom of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And let's go on now and talk actually about Scotland itself and talk less about politics here. Visitors to Scotland are always struck by the beauty of its countryside. Here, struck is the past tense and past participle of the verb to strike, and we often use this to refer to somebody being really impressed by something, especially if it's the first time. Oh, I was struck by the beauty of Taroko Gorge the first time I saw it.
Yeah, and here's a few things that might strike you if you went to Scotland. The country is home to Ben Nevis, the UK's highest mountain, so the tallest mountain in all of the UK is in Scotland, as is Loch Lomond, which is the largest lake there. And that's a super beautiful place. I've never got as far as Ben Nevis, but I have been to the banks of Loch Lomond. It's truly a beautiful place to see the sunrise over this huge silvery body of very clean water. So a loch is the Scottish word for lake. So it's basically just the same as lake, although they do use the word loch for an inlet from the sea. So a loch can connect to the sea, which we don't normally say of a lake.
I gotta ask you here, Pat. Sounds like you're speaking French or something. The loch.
Loch.
Not
yeah,
loch,
I'm trying to give it a little more of the Scottish pronunciation.
So that's how they would pronounce it up there,
right? A little more, yeah. Loch Lomond.
Okay, very good. So that's the largest lake in Scotland. And, of course, we're going to talk about some of the other sights and sounds that you could experience in Scotland if you go there yourself. But right now we're going to take a little bit of a break, but stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hello everyone, my name is Tina. 今天我们要去旅游的景点叫做 Scotland， 就是苏格兰这个地方。我们首先来看到今天文章的第一个句子写着 The fair country of Scotland occupies the northern third of the UK mainland. 在这里我们使用 occupy 本来是有占领占据的意思，不过呢如果你说到占用时间或空间，也可以用 occupy 这个动词。举例来说，阅读占据了我大部分的空闲时间，你就可以说 Reading occupies most of my free time。而这里的 Scotland 它用了一个形容词 fair， 非常美丽的国度，它占据了呢英国大陆北部的1/3，通常我们会说 1/3 代表1/3的意思。第一段的中间提到Once an independent nation, frequently at war with its southern neighbor, Scotland became closer with England in 1603, when King James VI ascended the English throne, becoming King James VI of Scotland and the first of England and Ireland.这个句子很长，我们先来了解一下它的主词就是 Scotland， 而它 once 一度曾经是一个独立的国家，但是当时呢常年都与它南方的邻邦来交战。我们用了 frequently 这个字来代表着频繁地的意思，但是到了1603年呢，它就 became closer with England， 它跟英国的关系变得比较紧密，因为呢当时国王呢他登上了英格兰的王位。我们首先来看到 ascend 这个动词本来是有登高上升的意思，而如果你说攀登也是可以解释成为这个意思。Ascend the throne 就是有登上王位， throne 当然指的就是君权或者是王权的意思咯。在此同时就成为了苏格兰国王詹姆斯6世以及英格兰和爱尔兰国王詹姆斯1世。这个句子真的很长，我们可以把它的主词先找出来，就可以看得清楚它的句子结构。在介绍完苏格兰的这个历史之后呢，第二段就是要介绍它美丽的乡间。 等一下我们就要来介绍英国的最大湖泊，英文称之为 Loch Lomond， 也就是洛蒙德湖。
We're going to take a short break now, but please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hi guys, welcome back to our article. We're talking about Scotland and some of the natural beauty it has. We just mentioned its mountains and its lochs. One thing about that pronunciation of the word, you definitely don't want to say loch. It may look like the word loch, but it's loch. It's more of a K sound. Now, also, there are over 790 islands all around Scotland, including the Shetlands and the Orkneys. Now, both of these are over the sea to the northeast of Scotland. They're almost, in fact, got a slightly Norwegian Viking sort of feel to them, because that's where many Vikings landed.
Okay.
And there are prehistoric ruins dating back over 5,000 years there. Few words to look at here. Prehistoric is the first one. It's an adjective, and it means that it comes from a time before history was kind of recorded and written down. So at that point, there weren't really many dates. We didn't really know when exactly these things happened, because they were very kind of simple. It's almost living in kind of stone buildings using very basic technology. Not many steps up from the kind of cavemen.
Yeah, the only way to really tell how old those ruins are is to use carbon dating or something like that, or perhaps some other scientific methods to estimate how old they are, because prehistoric means before things were written down, and ruins, used in the plural most often, that just refers to like old buildings or old structures that are no longer in perfect condition, but still they are historically significant, and people check them out all the time. I don't know if there are lots of prehistoric ruins here in Taiwan, but there are some in Asia, like in in Indonesia, there's Borobudur and stuff. Those are kind of ruins, or the ruins of Angkor Wat in Cambodia.
That's right,
for example.
yeah. Now, these particular ruins, they date back over 5,000 years. We can use this phrase date back or to date back to as an alternative, just to say how old something is, just to give a rough idea of when they were first constructed and talk about when they were first made. So dating back over 5,000 years just means these things are over 5,000 years old. Something they've done, as Tom said, with a bit of carbon dating, just to see how old some of these stones or bits of wood and things like that were. And these are some of the oldest kind of ruins and buildings in the UK.
You've been there.
I have not been all the way up to the Orkneys or Shetlands. I've seen them on TV shows and pictures and stuff like that. But yeah, people have learned a lot about kind of these prehistoric cultures by just kind of looking around and seeing what they have.
I suppose if you're interested in going there, you probably need to take a ferry or something.
A ferry
like
or
that.
a plane, yeah, and wait for good weather, which doesn't always happen. You can be trapped on some of those islands.
Well, it sounds like there are a lot of places to check out in Scotland itself, but besides those outlying islands. But in fact, wherever you go in the Scottish countryside, you feel like you are visiting an older world where things continue on as they always have, quite unaffected by modern changes. So yes, if you're kind of sick and tired of progress and seeing new developments all the time, you should go into the countryside of Scotland, because it looks like, hey, this looks like an older world 100, 500, 1,000 years ago. It looks like you're kind of stepping back in time.
Yeah, people are kind of, they're herding sheep, or there's cows. There's not many people around. You can go for a long time, and, you get away from the roads, no cars, just walking over some of these glens and so on. And it's just beautiful. You do feel like you are, just like you said, going back in time, because some of the countryside is unaffected or unchanged by the modern world. You can kind of forget it's there. And nowhere is this truer than in the highlands. So there's no other place where this feeling of an older world, of unchanged, kind of a lack of modern developments, nowhere is this more true or more apparent than in the highlands. Now, the Highlands are the northern and western parts of Scotland, and as you could probably guess, they're called Highlands because they're a lot higher. There are a lot more hills and mountains. It goes up. And they often call the other bits, particularly in the south, are known as the lowlands because they're lower down, fewer hills.
Are there Midlands anywhere?
Not really. It kind of goes from the lowlands then into the different highland districts.
Okay, so you get mountains and higher elevations and stuff like that. And as you said, the highlands are in the northern and western parts of Scotland. And we did talk about the population earlier. Here it says, sparsely populated and full of mountains, lakes, and glens. This beautiful region is also the home of the famous Loch Ness. I hope I said that right.
That's perfect.
Okay, this place is sparsely populated, which means there's a lot of land, but not a lot of people. You could say that places like Hualien or Nantou are sparsely populated, whereas places like Taipei and New Taipei City would be densely populated.
That's right. Populated is just an adjective used to talk about the number of usually people, you could also use it of animals, are in a particular area, and the adverb sparsely describes not many of these things. So it's full of countryside, but not very full of people. One thing it does have is Loch Ness, and you've probably heard of this because of, as we'll mention in our next sentence, a very famous creature. So this deep lake, remember Loch is a lake, and Loch Ness is actually, it's not as big as Loch Lomond, but it is deeper, which is one of the reasons for this particular story. The deep lake is said to be inhabited by Nessie, the Loch Ness monster. Nessie is the kind of fun name that's given to it, obviously, from the name Loch Ness. And the lake is said to be inhabited by Nessie, which means that Nessie is said to live there. She's said to swim in these dark waters, and they are pretty dark. I have been up to Loch Ness, and I've looked around it, and it's hard to, you can imagine that this is the sort of place where something could hide.
Why is the water so dark and murky? Do you know?
There's a lot of kind of mud and silt that kind of runs down from the banks. There are reeds and other plants in the water, and it's just deep, so the light doesn't get very far into it.
Okay, so people say that it is inhabited by Nessie, or we could say that Nessie basically lives there. I also heard that some scientists think that, well, if the Loch Ness Monster is living there, there are probably other ones there too, because one could not survive by itself for so long. But in any case, this is a mythical creature. Mythical means it has to do with myths, which means they're stories, but nobody really knows for sure if they're true. And I guess even with modern techniques and things like that, GPS and scanners and stuff like that, they still can't really determine whether this creature lives there or not. So it's still considered a mythical creature. Some people think it's a dinosaur or some unknown species. Species is basically a subdivision of animals that can, basically within a species, they can reproduce with each other.
That's right. So they're not sure. Some people have said it's a big kind of eel. It's a kind of dinosaur. There's been things like it's actually an elephant that got in there, and that's what people saw. Or it's a huge kind of water dog, or it's an odd fish, or, some kind of dragon creature, whatever you want to call it.
Maybe it's an optical illusion or something.
Exactly. And some of them are deliberate tricks. Some of the more famous Nessie photos are actually tricks. People just using some of the old stories from this area to get a bit of tourism and publicity. And there's no harm in that if it gets people up and looking around this beautiful area of Loch Ness.
And brings tourist dollars into Scotland. Why not? Now, many people take boat trips on the loch to gaze at the beautiful scenery and just maybe catch a glimpse of Nessie herself. Scenery here, I just want to say that this is a non-count noun. Do not make this a countable noun. I love the scenery in Kending, for example.
Yep, that's right. It just means the countryside, all the natural natural things we can see. We also have the word glimpse here. A glimpse is either a very quick view of something or a view where you only see part of something. Again, it's usually quick, so you might catch a glimpse of the sea as you're driving along the coast and then it's hidden again behind, as you turn a corner. Or you might catch a glimpse of a building in the distance and then you kind of walk behind a tree and then it's gone again. So here people are driving or walking or boating on the lake and they're trying to just look out just in case they see something pop out of the water or some shadow, huge shadow moving under the water and just like, what was that? Did I see something?
Yeah, you think with so many iPhones and camera phones and stuff like that, they would have caught something by now. So I'm beginning to think that this is just a big myth itself. But what the heck, it's fun. And there are lots of other things to see and do in Scotland. We'll talk about those in our next program, but right now we're going to say farewell after we hear from our Chinese teacher.
接着我们来看到这一句写着 There are over 790 islands, including the Shetlands and the Orkneys, where prehistoric ruins dating back over 5,000 years have been found. 在这里提到在苏格兰这个地方有超过790座的岛屿，包括了这个 Shetlands 跟 Orkneys 这些群岛。Where 是一个重要的考试点，在那个地方你可以找得到呢史前追回5000年前的史前遗迹。首先来看一下这个形容词 prehistoric， 从字面上可以看得出来 pre 它就是有在什么之前的意思，所以这个 prehistoric 有史前的。而 ruins 用来当作复数的名词，常常指的是废墟或者是遗迹，像是 ruins of the temple 指的是庙宇的遗迹。在这里同学可以从 dating 开始括号括到 5,000 years， 用来修饰这些史前遗迹呢可以追溯回超过5000年前， A date back 则是有回溯时间的意思。最后一段我们来看到第二个句子写着 Sparsely populated and full of mountains, lakes and glens, this beautiful region is also the home of the famous Loch Ness. 在这里提到的呢，就是在这个西北部的高地，这美丽的地区人烟稀少，我们用了 sparsely 这个副词，代表着稀疏的、稀少的的意思。而 populate 原本当作动词，有居住于哪里。换句话说，如果是有很多人居住着，我们就可以说 heavily populated。举例来说 The town is heavily populated by immigrants. 这个城镇居住着很多外来的移民，而这个美丽的地区呢，就有着尼斯湖这个湖泊所在。最后一句Many people take boat trips on the loch to gaze at the beautiful scenery and just maybe catch a glimpse of Nessie herself. 许多人呢都知道尼斯湖怪的这个传说，所以很多人会乘船游湖 gaze 就有凝望的意思，一边欣赏美丽的景色，也许也能瞥见尼斯湖水怪的本身。在这里 catch a glimpse of something 也就是有瞥见或一瞥什么东西的意思。OK， 以上就是今天的课文讲解，谢谢收听。
So that is the end of part 1 of our article about Scotland, the land of hill and glen. But join us again tomorrow to hear more about the culture of Scotland. We've talked about its country. Let's find out about part of its culture. Join us again for that. For English Digest, I'm Pat.
And I'm Tom.
See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye.